Sometimes the pressures just overwhelm you. And Moses, like us, knew such a time. We find there comes this statement that the rabble begin to rise up against Moses. Who are the rabble? Well, it looks like there are a number of Egyptians, a mixed multitude they're called, who kind of joined themselves to the people of God just as they were leaving Egypt. They were probably not actually Jewish people, but Egyptians who'd been impressed, no doubt, with Moses' growing stature and the power of the plagues and somehow God's obvious blessing on Israel, that they added themselves. And then as time goes on and they're going through this journey, they lose the plot completely and start moaning. Now, to be honest, you'll often get people who join a church, they kind of join the euphoria rather than join their identity in Christ or the vision that you carry. And then when you go through a tough patch, they're not quite so enthusiastic. And you find that they can begin to stir up the whole people. And you'll find here that in the end, the whole of Israel is turning against Moses. And he kind of squeals in the midst of the pressure. Leaders are sometimes squeezed in the pressure situation. And Moses kind of cries out to God, did I conceive these people? Did I bring them to birth? Are they my responsibility? And it's like, God, help. I can't do this. And you know, leaders can feel that strongly, but any believer can come to the place where it almost seems like God is asking more than you can give. And it's scary. And he begins to plead with God, help, I can't cope with this. And God's answer is remarkable. He says, is my hand shortened that I can't do this? You know, when they came through the Red Sea, Moses sang about God's great power, his mighty hand, and somehow in the midst of the pressure and the sense I've got to produce something, he got his eyes off of God. He felt, I've got to do this. And you know, you can get to that situation. And the Apostle Paul talks about a time when he was under incredible pressure. And then he says, who is sufficient for these things? And then his answer is not that we are sufficient of ourselves. And you know, sometimes that can come as a frightening discovery. I'm not sufficient of myself. But actually, that's how God's happy for the arrangement to be, that we're not sufficient of ourselves. It's part of the whole message. Paul goes on happily to say, our sufficiency is of God, who makes us sufficient. That is the wonder, that God chooses the weak things, the foolish things, the things that are not glorious or wise in themselves, that our confidence might be in God. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, Paul says. God is the one who wins the day and sees us through. So Moses had to kind of relearn that. And you know, you have to constantly relearn that. We're not stoics, we're not supermen, that we can cope with life and pressure. No, we come to crises where we're often cast back on God. Say, Lord, where are you? And then you find where he is. He's there with all his wonderful steadfast love, his power, his hand upon you. You have to relearn his utter faithfulness. Not that we're sufficient of ourselves. Our sufficiency is from God, who makes us sufficient.